Sir David Ford, the last British official to serve as Chief Secretary, has called it a day. His departure marks the final chapter in Hong Kong's colonial history. In his 26 years with the Hong Kong government, Sir David has weathered many a storm.
Well, there have been some pretty traumatic events, starting with my arrival in 1967. I came at a time when Hong Kong was at a very bad period in its history. Hong Kong was in the middle of great turmoil, which lasted between 6 and 8 months. There was rioting in the streets, there was bombing. The dollar was under great pressure, people were leaving in very large numbers, the confidence was at an all-time low, and many people said Hong Kong could not survive. And then, I suppose, the arrival of the Vietnamese boat people, which was the start of a huge problem for us, and one which we've had to grapple with for a very long time, was very traumatic. The stock exchange crash in 1987, when the governor had to be away, and Piers Jacobs and I were dealing with a lot of the fallout of that. That was an interesting time, to say the least. And I guess the final event which one can never forget is the events of Tiananmen as we saw them on television. And the great sadness that produced in everybody in Hong Kong.
Hi, Billy. See you later. Bye-bye.
Sir David joined the Hong Kong government in 1967. He became Chief Secretary in 1987 and held the job for 7 years. It was the longest tenure in the history of that office. As Chief Secretary, Sir David served under 2 governors. It describes Sir David Wilson and Mr. Chris Patten as very different in personality and in the way they work. This, however, hasn't affected his working relationship with them. Rarely did they find themselves on different sides of the net, except perhaps on the tennis court.
You've got to be playing on the same side of the net, and you've got to work together in terms of your strategy and your tactics. You want to provide a good, solid front so that you work together as a team. But you need lots of energy. You need to be resilient both when you're winning and when you're losing.
A year after becoming Chief Secretary, Sir David shut down the Administrative Services and Information Branch. In its place, he set up the Administration Wing and the Information Wing in his office, both of them reporting direct to him in coordinating the work of the government and the Legislative Council. Every morning, key personnel would join him in a briefing session.
Do we know what's happening on the private members' bill?
They have the meeting scheduled for this week. I'm a bit worried that it could be rather faster than we expected.
Yeah. We also have to watch the timing because Civil Service branch are thinking of announcing a couple of contract renewals. We want to look at the timing.
Yeah.
Kerry, I think you might look at that and the whole impact on the announcement of the extension of those contracts at the time when they're looking at private members' bill.
With the advent of representative government, Sir David believes that government officials are no longer just responsible for executing government policies. They now play a political role as well. He himself appeared to be a hardliner who was always ready to defend the government. The omission of 21 indirectly elected members of the Legislative Council in 1985 signaled the end of official dominance in the lawmaking body. In 1987, during the debate on Sir David Wilson's first policy speech, members of the council voiced sharp criticisms against the government.
中英列日聲明可以講係墨跡未乾，一國兩制、高度自治已有實現。港英政府而家已經受制於中國，差唔多根性正女咁樣嚟種搬家。
I welcome a close working relationship between this government and the Central People's Government. But we could overdo it. Indeed. While listening to the first part of your policy speech, sir, I thought it was the speech of the Chief Executive of the SAR government.
Chief Secretary.
When the time came for the officials to reply, Sir David lashed back at Pang Chung-hoi and Martin Lee. It was an unprecedented move, and the remarks he made that day would go down as his strongest ever.
Mr. Lee and Mr. Pang do a grave disservice to this community by trying to undermine the credibility of this administration. If they are playing politics, they are indeed playing a dangerous game. I refute them in the strongest possible terms. Those who continue to make them in the misguided belief that they are dealing with a lame duck will discover they have a tiger by the tail and not a paper tiger either.
當時唔單止我覺得驚奇，點解突然呢個政府官員係嘛受唔起立法局嘅少少批評係嘛？咁跳出嚟就話佢自己譬如話我都係隻老虎嚟㗎係嘛？
即係如果我哋係講得唔啱嘅，佢有權咁樣將件事帶出嚟講。但問題就係，我覺得即係我哋係啱，我哋一定咧喺啲問題上咧係盡我哋嘅能力，係甚至令到政府感覺到好難堪。因為如果政府係錯嘅，佢冇法子唔會感覺到難堪嘅。
I think the civil service expect their representatives in the Legislative Council to stand up for what they believe to be right. That applies if you're also defending government policy or if you're defending the integrity of the civil service. And so that's why I've never hesitated to present our case robustly. We are in the political arena. We are carrying out a political role, which is very unlike the role of civil servants elsewhere. And part of that political role means standing up and making one's points clearly and, if necessary, forcefully.
As 1997 approaches, civil servants are playing a more important political role and coming under increasing pressure. For this reason, some officials are worried that what they do for the government today may not be acceptable to the Chinese government after 1997.
我哋公務員執行咗嗰個政策，好可能係令到中方係唔多高興，因為呢個未必符合到中方嘅嗰個想法，或者佢認為係唔符合到基本法嘅嗰個有關嘅規定。如果中方係唔識得拆開，就係話公務員只係政策嘅執行者的話，而針對咗有關個人嘅話，將來喺97年之後，唔知會唔會受到將來特區政府嗰個歡迎？呢個係一個好強烈嘅夾縫嘅感覺。
The job of a civil servant is to stand up for what Hong Kong believes to be right and to implement the policies of the Hong Kong government, which after all are in the interests of Hong Kong people. Now sometimes that leads to some differences of opinion with China. That's been the case in the past, and I'm sure will be the case in the future. And I find it inconceivable that the Chinese government would subsequently blame them for doing that. Everything I've heard from the Chinese leadership has been to reassure the civil service. So I don't think they do need to have that worry, although it's understandable that some people should feel it, I guess.
The Chief Secretary's primary task is to lead the territory's 200,000 civil servants. Although the rate of attrition among them has remained below 6%, actual figures are not encouraging. In 1990, more than 9,000 people resigned. In 1991, 14,000, and last year, 11,000. More recently, even the Secretary for Education and Manpower, John Chan, and the Secretary for Transport, Yang Kai-yin, joined the ranks of those leaving public service.
長江嘅後浪好勁啊，都應該俾啲機會俾啲師弟師妹上場啦，係咪？即係無謂阻止地球戰。
Obviously, when people such as John Chan and K.Y. Young leave the service, that's a cause of regret for us. But it's very much a personal decision for those people, and I don't think it's up to us to question their motives in going. And I don't think it's something that we should be too concerned about. If it became a flood and we lost a very large number of people, then that's obviously would be a worry. But we're not in that situation.
In the Government Secretariat's waiting room, there's a plaque bearing the names of all previous chief secretaries and the dates on which they took office. Before 1976, the position carried the title Colonial Secretary. To play down any colonial overtones, it was later changed to Chief Secretary. Sir Dennis Roberts was the first Chief Secretary. The incumbent, Mrs. Anson Chan, is the sixth person to assume the position. She's also the first Hong Kong Chinese to get the job.
Okay.
That's a good timing for the job of Chief Secretary to be done by a local officer. I think it's very appropriate that for the last 3 years before the change of sovereignty, and I hope beyond that too, that we will have a local officer in post. That's something we've been planning for some time.
Morning, Sir David. How are you feel today?
Very sad to be leaving, of course.
In much the same way as the 1997 deadline accelerated the appointment of local Chinese to senior government positions, the China factor is exerting a growing influence on Hong Kong's government machinery. Sir Jack Cater, who became Hong Kong's second Chief Secretary in October 1978, recalls that during its time, there was absolutely no need to bring policy matters before China.
We had contacts with the Chinese. We had, for example, from a courtesy point of view, we would tell them what we would be saying in the annual speech of the governor. What we had to say to them 9 times out of 10, obviously, was a matter of courtesy and just telling them what we were about to do, and as a friendly gesture. But they didn't expect us to do it, and didn't require us to do it.
Sir David Akers-Jones, who took over as Chief Secretary in 1985, says China's influence on policy decisions can be traced back to the talks on Hong Kong's future.
As 1997 has grown nearer, gradually the position of China and what you call the China factor in our lives and in the life of the government has been growing and increasing all the time. Well, the China factor was very important during the drafting of the joint declaration, of course, and during the negotiations. We were entering a new phase in Hong Kong's history when we were engaged in a dialogue with the authorities in Beijing, really for the first time on a regular basis in Hong Kong's history.
In December 1984, Britain and China signed the joint declaration on the future of Hong Kong.
And we have to work more closely with China. That's an inevitable consequence of the return of sovereignty to China in 1997. That's foreshadowed in the joint declaration, and it's certainly happening. Adds a complicating factor to the job of the government, because we clearly have to take into account Chinese concerns in our policy making, and if we are making changes in policy or taking decisions which have long-term implications, which establish obligations, either financial obligations or legal obligations for the SAR government, then clearly we have to discuss those issues with China. It's as I say, it's a complicating factor, but it's one which we recognize as necessary.
The new airport project is an unforgettable episode from Sir David's many encounters with China during his term as Chief Secretary. In his 1989 policy speech, Governor Sir David Wilson outlined the Port and Airport Development Scheme, covering a new airport, port development and road systems. Some of the projects would extend beyond 1997, so China and Hong Kong agreed to set up an expert committee to look into the issues. For reasons unknown, 10 days before the experts convened for their first meeting, the Hong Kong government suddenly announced that the Tsing Ma Bridge would be built using public funds instead of by private developers. The move was perceived by China as an unfriendly gesture. Repeated arguments ensued over monetary reserves and the right of scrutiny.
港英当局突然宣布将其命议中的青马大桥由政府自行撤资兴建的决定，这种做法并不能视为明智。
咁當然我哋自己嘅儲備基金咧，主要嘅目的都係要嚟供我哋譬如有基建建設啊，或者其他嘅公共設施啊嚇，所以用作呢個用途咧係好正當啊。
這個領頭，全都花光了。你說怎麼辦？你說怎麼辦？你說怎麼辦？
One can criticize the exact timing, but the principle is an important one, that it was within the authority of the Hong Kong government to get ahead and build that bridge. As I say, I think the rightness of that decision has been borne out in practice. Certainly we did not regard, and I've never regarded any of our handling of the airport as in any way confrontational. We have recognized from right from the start that when we made the decision about the airport, that there would have been elements, that there were elements in the project that had to be discussed with China.
The row over the new airport eventually escalated to diplomatic levels, and the storm did not die down until Chinese and British leaders signed a memorandum of understanding. The document states that all exclusive rights, contracts and debt guarantees arising out of the project and extending beyond 1997 are subject to discussion between China and Britain.
I mean, it's very clear that those elements that we have been able to get on with by ourselves, those elements in the Public Works Programme, we've made tremendous progress with, Hong Kong-type progress, if I might say so. But in areas where we have had to have those discussions with China, those discussions have been very protracted, and I think that's a great pity. And we ought to be able to solve those matters much more quickly than we have been able to do in practice.
Just before leaving office, Sir David remarked that as Hong Kong entered the latter part of the transition and political forces came into play, the Chief Secretary would face an increasingly thankless task that would grow more and more complicated.
This is my first day in my new office as Chief Secretary. Of course, I'm very excited. I've gone through a whole series of meetings, and I look forward to the challenges ahead. I have no doubt that there will be, ups and downs, but I shall, as usual, take that in my stride.
Well, I don't suppose any job ever gets easier as it goes by, and clearly the next 3 years, running up to 1997, are going to be quite crucial. I expect the pressures on my predecessor, my successor, to be as strong, if not stronger, than they've been on me. But every good secretary has to be, first of all, resilient, secondly, healthy, and thirdly, have a good sense of humour. And Anson has all those three, and I'm sure she'll cope with it very well.
When interviewed on the eve of his departure, Sir David showed signs that he was sorry to leave. But despite the incessant arguments between China and Britain, he remains full of confidence in the people of Hong Kong.
undoubtedly what makes Hong Kong a successful place it is. It isn't geography, it isn't the government, it is actually Hong Kong people who have made Hong Kong people the great success it is, and they're not going to change. I think their qualities are outstanding, and they're very steadfast, and that's why I have confidence in the future of this place. It is because Hong Kong people will always make it a successful place.